What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. Now we need to talk about the 911 GT3. Over the last few months, more and more spy shots emerged from the all-new 992 GT3. And it seems to be one of the most anticipated cars. I do then also feel that the GT3, and not just the new one, but any GT3 has a special spot in every petrolhead's heart. Honestly, I never came across anyone who doesn't appreciate the GT3. Unfortunately, this popularity is also reflected in the prices. Porsche GT products and especially the GT3 tend to have extremely strong residuals, making even the older cars quite expensive. However, if you look at it from the other perspective, then it also means that if you do manage to get yourself into one, and this can already happen from around $70,000, your money is relatively safe. You do, however, need to be up to date on the GT3 market. It is namely characterized by many peculiarities. Some cars which look the same may be priced completely different, and cars which differ 10 years in age may have the same price. In this video I will then also go through the full US GT3 market and tell you everything what you need to know about GT3 values. And that also means that this will be a long, but hopefully informative and a tad nerdy video. And if you enjoyed this data-driven way of looking at car markets, please support the channel by smashing that like button. And if you don't like data, then you're probably not going to like this video. Now let's first have a look at the full market so you get an idea about the size and the different price levels. You can see that we have the model year on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. Also, you can see that I split the market by generation. Let me quickly run you through some numbers. At the moment, there are only 120 GT3s for sale in the US. And given that the market is 16 years old, the GT3 is a very exclusive car. Also, like I mentioned before, prices are all over the place. They start at $70,000 but go up to $200,000. Now to structure the analysis a bit and make sure that we don't miss anything, I will analyze each generation individually. And that means that we will have a look at the price, the depreciation numbers, how the market changed in 1 year time, and where applicable, also to the latest auction results. And I will make sure to put these YouTube video chapters down below here in the play bar so you can navigate to the generation you are most interested in. And once we're done with the analysis of the sub-segments, so the analysis for each generation, we will take a step back and look at the full market and the bigger market trends. Let's start now with the older car, the 996.2. We can see that there are only 12 cars for sale and these tend to cost around $92,000. The market, however, seems to be divided into sub-markets. One segment contains the cheaper cars, while the segment at the top clearly contains the more expensive cars. And look what a price difference we have there. The cars over here are $25,000 to $30,000 more expensive. Now this graph shows us the relationship between the model year and the price. And as you can see, the model year can't explain these price differences. Or in other words, these cars don't depreciate anymore. But I think that you would have already guessed that. It is then also the mileage which can explain these price differences. So let's have a look at the market from a mileage perspective. Look at this. Isn't this a beautiful curve? This curve namely shows that every 1,000 miles the car loses $727. Or in other words, the mileage is an important driver for the price. Now this number of $727 per 1,000 miles is an average. You can see that especially the cars under 20,000 miles go for a huge premium. After this threshold, the market puts less importance on the mileage as the price decreases when the mileage increases. And this pricing behavior is very typical for car markets which are bottomed out. Note though that the shaded area over here is extremely large. And this means that the uncertainty in the estimate is high here. And this is of course because we only have one car with such a high mileage. Now the two graphs which I just showed you are of course static market pictures. And that's why it's important to also have a look at the auction data. This will namely give us an idea of the value development over time. So let's have a look at the auction results from Bring a Trailer to see if our picture is in line with transaction data. Here we have now the time on the horizontal axis and the prices still on the vertical axis. First, we can see that values are extremely stable and that over the last 3 years, GT3 sold between $60,000 and $75,000. It are however the track prepped cars which are priced at the bottom end of the market. The other cars are priced at the top end between $70,000 and $75,000 and these cars have a mileage between 30 and 50,000 miles. And this is in line with what we are currently seeing in the market. We namely saw that with this mileage, the asking price lays somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000. so a selling price in the low 70s seems correct. Now unfortunately, there was only one car sold with an extremely low mileage. This car over here has a mileage of 10,000 miles and sold for $80,000. And when we compare this to the current market, then we can see that there's quite a big discrepancy between the prices. Cars with a mileage of 10,000 miles are now priced between $110,000 and $120,000. So that can mean a few things. First, it can mean that these cars over here are priced way too high and that they will never sell. At least not for that price. However, and this is more likely I think, it can also be so that prices for the low mileage cars went up in the last 3 years. Now there is nobody who knows for sure where the prices will be heading in the future. But based on the data which I just showed you, I don't see them dropping anytime soon. Let's see now if this also goes for the 997 generation, and we will start with the 997.1. If we start again with the model year versus price view, we can see that the market is even smaller than for the 996.2. There are only 8 cars for sale. And this is not so strange. Only 970 units were sold in the US. Now compared to the 996.2, the prices are slightly higher as a 997.1 tends to go for $96,500. But also here, we can see that there is a lot of price variation. Prices start in the high 70s but then go up to $120,000. And just as in the 996 market, model year can't explain this price difference. So let's have a look at the market from a mileage perspective. The first thing which will probably catch your eye is this shaded area. This is extremely large because the depreciation line is based on only a few observations. So you need to interpret the depreciation with some care. Nevertheless, if we go with what we have, then we can see that the 997.1 loses $800 per 1,000 miles driven. So also here the mileage is a key price driver. And just as with the 996.2, the low mileage cars go for a premium of around $25,000 to $30,000. The higher mileage cars, so the cars with around 30,000 to 40,000 miles, are priced at $90,000. We can see though that there is one exception to this rule. The car over here. This car has a mileage of $30,000 but is priced far above the rest of the market. And in my mind this price is a tad optimistic. But perhaps I'm wrong. Let's have a look at the transaction data from Bring a Trailer. If we forget about the track prepped cars, then we can see that prices start in the high 70s, but that the range between $80,000 and $100,000 is really where these cars are selling. Now the upper part of that range, so between $90,000 and $100,000, seems to be mostly reserved for cars with a mileage less than 20,000 miles. However, we can see that more recently, also a car with 26,000 miles was sold for $96,000. So the picture isn't as clear-cut as in the 996 market. What we can see though is that the price for which some cars are advertised might be a bit too optimistic. I don't think that $120,000 is a realistic selling price. Or the $110,000 for this example over here, which has 30,000 miles. We can see for example that the reserve for a car with 2.6 thousand miles was not met at $107,500. And with that you are up to date on the 997.1 market. So let's move on to the 997.2 market. Before we do so, please smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. It really helps to support the channel. Also, if you like this data-driven approach but would like to see it for a different car, have a look at my channel. Over there you will find for example an analysis for the GT3 RS and a normal Carrera S. Now if the car you are looking for is not there, please leave a comment down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. Also make sure then that you subscribe and click the notification bell so you will get actually notified when your requested analysis goes live. Now then, let's move on with the 997.2 market. This market is extremely small as there are only 9 cars for sale. And also this doesn't come as a surprise. There were only 654 cars sold in the US. They are however significantly more expensive than the 997.1. as these cars tend to cost around $120,000. Again, and you must know this story by now, we can see that there are large price differences and that this model year versus price graph can't explain these price differences. So again, and I bet you know what's coming, let's have a look at the market from a mileage perspective. And what you can see here is that there is only a very weak relationship between the mileage and the price. Up until 30,000 miles, there doesn't seem to be a difference in pricing. Only the cars which sit at the top end of the mileage spectrum clearly go for a discount compared to the rest of the market. Nevertheless, just as in the other markets, there's a large uncertainty in the estimate over here. So we need to interpret this relationship with some care. After all, there can be other reasons as to why these cars with a mileage of 20 to 25,000 miles are priced so high. And then you could think of things like an excellent maintenance history and the spec level. However, these prices might be too ambitious. Let's see what the transaction data has to say. Perhaps that will clarify some things. The cars which you see here have from left to right 30, 27, 15, 16 and 14,000 miles. Now based on these few observations, it seems that the price came down slightly in the last 2 years. Also, I think that the asking prices which we saw in the previous graph are perhaps a bit too high. You can see for example that these two low mileage examples went for $92,000. And that is a stunning $28,000 and $38,000 below the market asking price. Also, have a look at the cars which didn't sell. People tend to bid up to somewhere between $85,000 and $95,000, but then the interest seems to disappear. And with that we will move on to the modern GT3s, the 991s. And we will start with the 991.1. Now for the 991.1, and by the way also for the 991.2, I already made an analysis 9 months ago. And if you're interested in that, then I recommend that you click on the pop-up banner appearing over here. And the good news is of course that we can compare the prices now to the prices 9 months ago. And this will give us some extra insights. But let's first have a look at the current market. The 991.1 was, especially in the beginning of its lifetime, plagued by reliability issues. Nevertheless, you can see that it didn't affect its popularity, as there are 49 cars for sale. Interestingly though, with a median price of $124,000, they are priced almost the same as a 997.2. And at first, it appears to be so that there is a relatively strong relationship between the model year and the price, also known as the depreciation per year. We however need to be careful with this conclusion. There are only 4 cars from model year 2016 for sale, and these are priced all really high. They are however priced so high because they have a low mileage and not necessarily because they are from a newer model year. The depreciation line between model year 2015 and 2014 probably gives a more reliable estimate. So how did this market look in January? Let's also include those numbers in the graph. There are namely some things going on which I didn't expect. In fact, things which I've never seen before. You can see that the current market is now displayed in blue and that the one of last January is displayed in orange. So what do we see here? Well, prices didn't decrease at all. In fact, if anything, they increased slightly. For model year 2016 we have too few observations, but for 2014 and 2015 they actually increased with an average of $4,000. Now this observation by itself is not enough to conclude that prices are actually moving up. It might be so that the market composition changed. It is then also so that, statistically speaking, the price distribution didn't change. So when I first saw this, I thought, well, that must mean that also the mileage distribution didn't change. After all, if these cars are not driven, values are usually quite stable. But I was wrong. Let me take you on a little detour before we continue. The picture which you see here compares the mileage and the price for the 2 dates. And if you look at the 2 price distributions, then you can see that the price distribution didn't really change. This in itself is already quite remarkable. However, if we look at the mileage distributions, then we can see that the mileages increased. In fact, they increased with an average of 2.4 thousand miles. So what do those 2 observations actually mean? Well, it means that you need to pay the same amount of money for a car as 9 months ago, but that you get a higher mileage car in return. And at first I couldn't really believe this. I thought that I must have somehow messed up the 2 dates, but I checked it 100 times and the picture over here is correct. We can then also see the same development in the depreciation per 1000 miles graph. So let's have a look at that. Here you can see that the sensitivity to mileage didn't change. The slope of the 2 depreciation lines are the same. You can however see that the line for today's market, so the blue line, lays above the orange one. And this means that for a car of let's say 20,000 miles, you need to bring on average more money to your dealer. Now those were just the plain numbers. But what actually happened in this market? In the video which I showed you last April, I namely told you that my conservative estimate was that you could expect a drop of maximum $9,000. Well, the cars clearly lost much less. In fact, nothing. And there are 2 explanations for this. First, the mileage increase which we've seen in the market is slightly less than what we've seen historically. And the lower increase in the mileage means a lower decrease in the price. Second, and I think that this is the driving factor, the used car market in general has been booming due to a limited supply of new cars. And this is actually in line with what we saw earlier. In this video over here, pop-up banner appearing right over here, I namely compared how the prices changed for the F430, the 570S and the 718 Cayman. And to sum it up, prices for the 718 and for the F430 moved in line with what we could expect. Prices for the 570, however, hardly move. Moreover, we saw in a video which I published in July that the prices for a C7 Corvette didn't really change. So in many markets, prices are not plummeting. In fact, they are quite stable. And that seems to support what we are seeing here in the GT3 market. But there's also the transaction data confirm this. Let's have a look again at the auction results from Bring a Trailer. We can see that there are only a few 991.1 GT3 sold. Market prices, however, remain quite stable. If we forget this bubble on the right, because this is a track car, then we can see that the GT3 with 10,000 miles is going for $100,000 to $120,000. And I would say that the prices at the bottom of this range are quite low. And if you manage to get one at this price, then you get a good deal. The area around $110,000 seems to be more in line with the rest of the market. And with that out of the way, let's have a look at the last generation, the 991.2. By many, this is considered to be the ultimate GT3. And this is certainly reflected in the prices. This generation is namely by far the most expensive with a price of $165,000. And we of course have a touring variation in this generation. Now it seems to be so that these go for a large premium. But this can partly be explained by the fact that all of the Tourings have a very low mileage. And you can see that some other non-touring GT3s with a low mileage also go for a large premium. The majority of the market, however, has around 7,000 miles and is priced a lot lower. Now let's compare this picture again to the one 9 months ago. And for that comparison I will exclude the Tourings. These were namely not included in the analysis 9 months ago. First, you will notice that the market shrunk a lot. 9 months ago there were 115 cars for sale versus only 42 now. And I guess that makes sense, given that there are no new GT3s entering the market. Price-wise you can see that values came down by $6,300 and this decrease is statistically confirmed. Also note that this decrease is slightly better than the $9,000 which was forecasted. Now if we look a bit better to this decrease, then we can see that it is mainly caused by the almost brand new cars which took their first depreciation hit. You can then also see that the number of cars for sale in the $160,000 to $200,000 region decreased a lot. The bottom of the market remained however intact. And if we look at the market from a mileage perspective, this conclusion gets confirmed. You can see that as of today there are a lot less low mileage high price cars for sale. It are then also these which are responsible for the price decrease. And as you can see from the depreciation curve, there is hardly any change for the other market areas. Also, you can see that around 8 people had a blast in their GT3 as there are now a lot more cars on the market with more than 10,000 miles. The overall mileage distribution of the full market shifts then also to the right, explaining the price decrease. Now one other important factor to keep in mind here is the difference between the manual and the PDKs. The manuals go for a premium of $6,000 to $9,000 and this premium increased over the last months. Also, when we look at the market segment where this price decrease of $6,300 took place, then we can see that it are mainly the automatics which decrease with this amount. The manuals decreased around half of that. Now also the transaction data seems to confirm that it is mainly the mileage increase which is causing the price decrease. Only a few 991.2 GT3s were sold on Bring a Trailer, but almost all of these are extremely low mileage cars. And based on the data what we have, we can see that the cars which are not driven remain stable in price. Alright, we investigated now each generation. Let's now take a step back and have a look at the full market to see what's going on over there. So we saw that all models, with exception of the 991.2, displayed very stable prices. Some of the 991.2s were simply brand new and then there is no way around it. There will be an initial depreciation hit. But isn't this a remarkable market? Have a look at those price levels. The 997.2 sits in the same price range as the 991.1, while it is 4 years older. It is then also so that the 997.2 is a lot more rare, with only 654 units sold in the US. Perhaps the 997.2 simply offers the best of both worlds. You get an analog driving experience while still having the convenience of, for example, a lifting system. However, I do question a few of the asking prices of these 997.2s. They seem to be a bit on the high side. You can see then also that the gap to the 997.1 and 996.2 is huge. But speaking about the 996, let's have a look to this picture but then from a mileage perspective, because that will give us a different view. The average depreciation per 1,000 miles is now appearing and we need to interpret these numbers with some care. Exactly because these are averages. The graph shows you that the 996.2 has the lowest sensitivity to mileage and is also the cheapest way to enter the GT3 market. However, This market starts to show a pattern of a classic market. Low mileage and well-documented cars go for a large premium. The higher the mileage, the less important the mileage becomes. And this means that, indeed, for the high mileage cars the sensitivity is low, but that it may be high for the low mileage cars. And if you are then looking at the low mileage 996.2 examples, so around the $120,000 price point, then you can see that the GT3 world opens up for you. At that price you can choose between a 997.1, .2 and even a 991.1. And this is quite remarkable. Usually you can see large price breaks between the different generations, like you can see between the 991.2 and the rest of the market. True, you can still see some breaks in the market, but the effect is only small. The 997.2 is even priced in line with or above the 991.1. But like I mentioned before, some of these prices for the 997.2 might be a bit exaggerated. Now this comparison also shows us that the uncertainty in the GT3 market can be quite large, especially if we look at the 997.2 and 997.1 markets. The shaded areas are extremely large there. Now this is of course a consequence of the small market size. So if you are trying to sell your GT3 or looking to purchase one, it might be worthwhile to give it a few shots. Alright, we covered all of the generations and had a look at the larger market picture. But one generation is of course still missing. The upcoming 992 GT3. Now of course, we don't have any data available for this market. But I think that prices will follow the same pattern as what we've seen historically for the GT3s. And that means that after the introduction, prices will fluctuate. And this can be both ways, up and down. However, after a year or so, I expect them to take the first depreciation hit as mileage will be added to the cars. And all of this is similar to what we see in the 991.2 market. After this, I think that prices will stabilize, and this is similar to what we see in the 991.1 market. Now as a final note, and I mentioned this a few times already in the video, prices can also be affected by other things than what we've taken into account in this video. Think for example about the maintenance history and the spec level. But unfortunately, the data quality on those items is too poor to take into account here, especially in markets which are already small. So in the beginning of this video I said that the GT3 is probably the most loved cars by petrol heads. And this is certainly reflected in the prices. Even the GT3s which are 16 years old and have around 80,000 miles on the clock still go for around $70,000. We also saw that there are many things going on in the GT3 market and that you need to do your research, like watching this video, very well before you plunge into one. And with that we arrive at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed this video, please remember to support the channel by smashing that like button. Also remember that you can comment the name of the car for which you would like to see an analysis down below in the comment section. As always, a huge thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new analysis.